It's that time of year when a small injury can end a player's season in a hurry, and teams out of contention can shift their lineups to develop younger talent. We're going to help you avoid a lot of those landmines tonight by giving you some recommendations to navigate the injuries, especially those wide receiver injuries that came up for Week 15. This is the Football Guys Daily Fantasy Power Grid presented by DraftKings. We're going to start where we always do, Vegas. Let's look at those lines and the totals. John Lee, guide us through what Vegas is telling you.
We've got a couple heavy home favorites this week in the form of San Francisco and Kansas City. Typically, we love to target the running game, but I think San Francisco is really tough to do these days with that kind of split action they're running out there. We'll talk a little bit how to handle that split backfield, if at all. But they are 10.5-point favorites at home against Atlanta. Kansas City, 10-point favorites at home against Denver. Those are two games at the top of the list, but just after that, you got Seattle on the road. They're almost a touchdown favorite over Carolina. Both running backs in that game look really attractive this week. We'll talk about them in just a bit. And then just below that, the number 4 team in terms of implied team total on the main slate, none other than the Tennessee Titans of all teams. You've got Ryan Tannehill there just tearing it up. 42 points last week, 31, 42 this week. It looks like they're slated to score 27.3 according to the Vegas value chart. Going up against Houston, who hasn't done a whole lot on defense. Maybe there's some reasons to go back to the well there. And then Devin, just after that, Devin, you got your Cleveland Browns, believe it or not, at 26 points going on the road against Arizona's defense. That's kind of interesting. And then after that, I think it's a good week to do some game stacks. There are 48.5, 51, 49. Dallas and the Rams kind of stands out as a game stack. There's a lot of different ways to go this week.
The Dolphins and the Giants.
The Dolphins and the Giants. Just when I thought I was getting on a roll, this guy talks about the Dolphins and the Giants. I'll end it there because I don't know how to even top that. Let's get into quarterbacks, I guess. Austin.
Yeah, let's do it. The only quarterback we have our eye on really is Jameis Winston, who's been trying to grip a football but is struggling with that. We'll see if he plays or not. Devin, tell us about your Dolphins-Giants love.
Well, we're also watching Daniel Jones, right? He's questionable. It looks like he's not going to play.
Right.
and you don't want him to.
If he doesn't,
you don't want him to.
If he doesn't, I'm going one last time. Eli Manning on FanDuel at 5,200.
It's your last chance ever.
It is. Well, I don't know about ever. I think he finds a spot next year somewhere. And he couldn't be in a better matchup this week. So if you look at Miami, they've allowed 250 yards or more in 4 straight games and 3 touchdowns in 3 of those 4. So we know that their entire secondary from the start of the season, whether it's Minkah Fitzpatrick, whether it's Rashad Jones, whether it's Xavier Howard, all out for the year, and they're starting a bunch of practice squad guys. So if there's one thing Eli can do, it's move the ball, not always efficiently, not always going to complete the passes to the right team, but he's going to throw for a lot of yards, and he'll find the end zone probably twice. I think he throws 300 yards and at least 2 touchdowns in this game at 5,200.
So are you saying that he's cash viable here? You said on
absolutely.
FanDuel?
On DraftKings.
I'm sorry, on DraftKings. Okay.
Yeah. On the other side of the ball, on the other side of the game, I like Ryan Fitzpatrick on FanDuel a lot. I think that this game is going to be neither team can stop the pass. They're 2 of the worst pass defenses in football. John's talked about the Giants secondary for most of the season. And he's right. They're one of the worst groups in the league. And what is Ryan? I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick this is his last hurrah. I mean, he's playing with house money. He's going out there and just has a Brett Favre gunslinger mentality of just having fun and throwing the ball. He ran for 50 yards against the Browns a couple weeks ago. Like he's just out there having as Sergio Dip said a couple years ago, having the time of his life. If you guys remember that, if not, look it up. But
Sergio who?
Sergio Dip. He was the sideline reporter in week 1 of. He was the Mexican.
See the ESPN Latino reporter?
ESPN Deportes. Deportes guy. Look it up. It's a very funny clip.
It's ringing a bell now. John thought you were talking about some sort of pop music artist for a minute.
No. Sergio Dip. Go look him up. Very funny video. Right. But anyway, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick at 5,300 or 7,300 is totally viable. We're going to get into where to save money, and I don't like a lot of these options. I kind of like some of the top-end running backs and receivers, so I think that's where I'm spending my money. I'll let some of the other guys talk about Tannehill and Watson and Mahomes because they're all in great spots too.
Yeah, it seems like at the top of the list, the two sites, FanDuel and DraftKings, the kind of top picks line up in value. But after that, the pricing on quarterbacks this week feels very different between the two sites. So I think it's important when you're digging deeper at quarterbacks to really pay attention to which site has the better value. Ryan, tell me, which quarterbacks do you like?
Yeah, so all year, I think we've ping-ponged back and forth between Devin and John recommending Jameis Winston, and I've never been that guy. And I really wish he hadn't messed up his thumb, I think it is, last week, because I'm finally coming around, but now I'm having to watch injury reports, and I'm getting talked off of it because of he can't hold a football, all the small hands narratives, which are very funny. So outside of Jameis Winston, there's a lot to be said. Of course, Devin mentioned Tannehill, and that game is one of those shootouts, right? So we talked about it. Usually this late in the year, if division teams are playing, it's the second time and they're familiar with each other. In a rare thing, Houston and Tennessee have yet to play each other. They finished with 2 out of the last 3. So we've got a game with a high total, a close spread. The Titans' offensive touchdowns in Ryan Tannehill's 7 starts, 3 or more in every single start, including one with 6 and including another with 5 last week. So they are a machine right now. They're also running no huddle at 21% over the last 4 weeks, which is, I think, the third highest in the league. So not only are they increasing in efficiency with him, they're increasing in pace too. I mean, they are firing on all cylinders. Tannehill, Devin mentioned pre-show, the FanDuel price is better, but even on DraftKings, it's more of a GPP play because I think he's something like QB5 in pricing, but QB12 according to our projections, right? So he is priced up for the matchup there, but there is a ceiling with him, and we've seen it time and time again. The only question is, is this streak going to come to an end? Or are the Titans finally going to be the Titans we know? 7 weeks of data says no, so ride the wave, right? And one last one I have here, it's GPP only because Steve has him under 1% right now, and I want Devin to just get his red sign ready. But
hold on.
This quarterback has 3 passing touchdowns in 2 straight, and in 3 of his last 5 games. Mitchell Trubisky ran for 63 yards and a touchdown last week. He has 4 or more rushing attempts in 3 straight. So that ceiling we saw last year can be back if he runs 6 times, 7 times in a game. DraftKings has him priced at 6,000, which is above Kyler Murray, well above Eli Manning. So that's probably why the percent projected will be down, but the ceiling might be back for Mitch Trubisky. So that's a long shot GPP play there.
John, tell us, who are the safe quarterbacks for cash games this week? Because I hear a lot of names I'm not used to hearing in this segment, and I feel like, we got Lamar Jackson on the Thursday night game, so we can't just fall back on that. Who are we going to in cash games, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with the guys and Eli Manning going up against Miami. That's your team, right?
They're awful. Don't get me wrong, but it's still Eli Manning.
I mean, Manning, look, he actually looked good on some of the deeper routes last week, and I was surprised. He missed some close crossing patterns and that kind of thing. He was a little bit off in terms of his accuracy. But when it came time to hit somebody on a deeper route, I thought he looked decent for a guy who's played in 2 months.
He was just rusty.
Whatever. I mean, look, he's as you already pointed out, Devin, he's going to play this team, the Dolphins, when they had all their starters and everybody was healthy, they were terrible. Yeah. And now they're mailing it in for the season. $5,200. The guy needs 200 passing yards and a touchdown, and he's basically there.
And who wants to go to New Jersey 2 weeks in a row like the Dolphins have to?
Oh man, that's unfair.
This is true. So I think Manning's the way I want to go there, but I do think that if you don't want to go with Eli Manning, I think you go with the rookie. You guys have already talked about him, Kyler Murray, 5,600 against Cleveland. Maybe the upside's not there, and I think that's where Devin would argue that Cleveland hasn't given up the big game, but in terms of our projections, I think he's the highest overall point per dollar quarterback this week. Some preliminary numbers that I ran earlier this week, he's the guy most likely to reach 4x value according to some of the metrics that I run. I think he's got the GPP upside as well. But, the truth is I think Eli Manning for 400 less, I'm happy to go that route. In terms of GPPs, I agree with the Tannehill take. I know that Devin, that drives him crazy. Tannehill against Houston, I think over the past 5 weeks, normalized strength of schedule. Houston is second worst in the league behind those same Arizona Cardinals that we just referenced. And then I think you can go with either quarterback in that game in Dallas with the Rams and Dallas, of course, the Cowboys. Both of them are in the 6,000s, and it's a game that could shoot out. I think the game total was 49 points. Both of them, in terms of pace, they run pretty quick offenses. And if we go back to normalized strength of schedule over the past 5 weeks, the Dallas Cowboys have played East Bumble High and a few other teams, and they're third worst in the league. So if they're giving up some big yardage to some inferior teams, the likes of the Buffalo Bills, New York Jets, and so forth.
Did they lose those games?
They did lose those games, yes. But now they're playing the Rams, and over the past 2 weeks, Jared Goff has actually looked pretty good. That offense is starting to click. I think he's had almost 300 yards, and then the week prior to that, over 400 yards. So I wouldn't be surprised to see these teams go back and forth at one another in a potential shootout. So I like either one of those in GPP.
Devin, we haven't talked about Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes yet. Why not?
I don't know. I like Watson quite a bit this week. I don't love Mahomes. I think it's sort of a wait and see type of thing for me. He just hasn't looked right since he's come back. I mean, I know he threw for 283 yards against the Patriots, but we talked about it last week where since he's come back, he's thrown for 182, 175, and 283. One of those games against the Raiders, but I know there's some wind in that game, but he just doesn't look 100%. So I don't know. I can't do it without rushing upside to pay that much. Watson I'm fine with. If you can find the dollars to go up to Watson in cash, I'm completely okay with that. I just can't trust Mahomes knowing that Eli Manning could throw for 300 yards this week. It's very possible, and you kind of need that 400-yard game from Mahomes, and right now I don't think the upside is there.
Yeah. All right.
I'm going to disagree with that. I think the upside is there. I think really for me what it comes down to is game strategy and ownership. Right now, everything that Devin said, with the exception of since he's come back, he did have a 450-yard game since he's come back. You missed that one when you said it. But
against Tennessee, he had a huge game against Tennessee.
His first game back, he had a huge game.
Yeah.
But you're right about the other 3 games, and those are more recent. So, I'll give you that. But in fairness, the one game against Oakland, they jumped out to an early lead. He didn't need to throw. And then last week, he was a few drop passes away from having a 300-yard game. So I think the upside is still there. Really what it boils down to here is game strategy and overall ownership. As of Thursday night, our buddy Steve Buzzard has him at the second highest owned quarterback at 9%, just behind Dak Prescott. If he stays that high, I think he's probably a fade, so I would agree with Devin, but I suspect he's going to drop because of his price. And if he does drop, I think I'll be overweight on him against a team that's perceived to have a a good secondary, and I think that we all would agree that he's largely matchup proof. So monitor Buzzard's ownership projections heading into the weekend, and then make those adjustments accordingly.
One last thing worth noting. Since 2016, Deshaun Watson without Will Fuller, 6 fewer points per game without.
Gotcha.
So keep the Will Fuller thing in mind. That's why I didn't mention him, just because I don't know about Fuller yet.
Yeah, and it sounds like Fuller is trending towards playing, but it's a little tricky, right? With speed receiver, that kind of injury, like he watch it closely.
Yep.
Let's look at running backs. Oh, hey, by the way, we added a new feature to our lineup optimizer this week. There's a single lineup build mode. So if you tried our lineup optimizer earlier in the season and it was like a little overwhelming, this is kind of like a chopped down version if you like kind of building one lineup at a time. So it's maybe for a little bit more casual style of lineup building. So give that a peek if you're a Football Guys subscriber. Check that out. And then for the multi-week stuff, it's the same as it always has been. We didn't change that. So give that a shot. Running backs, let's see here. Devin, I'll come to you first. Let's talk about running backs. The guys I have on my list are Rashad Penny's out for the year. Maybe that helps Chris Carson in this great matchup against Carolina. We got Darius Geis is out for the year. And it looks like Devonta Freeman's kind of on the fence this week. Not that it really matters against San Francisco. And then Alexander Madison did not practice on Thursday. That may be good for Dalvin Cook's outlook. Devin, take it away. Who you like your running back?
I mean, I think it's both the running backs in the Seattle-Carolina game are the top two. I'm forcing both of them in cash. Seattle, some people may be intimidated by, but they've given up 4.6 yards per carry on the year. Kyle Allen's not going to be able to move the ball against this Seahawks defense. It's going to be Christian McCaffrey. I know he's expensive, but we've already mentioned one way to save money at the quarterback section. And his price has come down a little bit. He's down to $10,000 on DraftKings, and he's down to $10,400, which is a significant reduction on FanDuel. Going over to Carson, you mentioned it. Penny's out for the year, and the Panthers have given up everyone. I mean,
they're the worst.
I think they've given up 10 touchdowns in the last 5 weeks. So it's a major issue that they can't stop anybody. So I don't know. I'm playing both of those basically everywhere and kind of moving on from the position, at least in cash.
It's one of those things where it's very rare that you'd want to play both running backs from the same game, but this is that kind of perfect storm where it's kind of hard to ignore.
And then one GPP play real quick.
Yeah.
I'll go with Joe Mixon. So going up against a New England defense that has allowed the least amount of fantasy points to opposing running backs, which I don't know what his ownership projections are going to be, but I would imagine pretty low based on that stat. But the Bengals have been committed to running the ball with Mixon. Even in their losses, he ran the ball 30 times against the Ravens in a game that they lost by like 50 points. So it's a scenario in which the Patriots' run defense really hasn't been – it's mostly been they've been ahead and the teams haven't had to throw the ball, but they're giving up 4.3 yards per carry. If Mixon gets 20 touches, which I expect that he probably will, at 6,100 on DraftKings and 6,700, especially on FanDuel, is a great price.
Right on. John, who do you like at running back this week?
So I'll echo that game. It looks like the right spot for both of those running backs. Christian McCaffrey. The only thing that I'll say is that basically eats up a third of your entire salary if you go with those guys on DraftKings. And I think you can fit it in. I built a lineup earlier today where you can get those guys in. You just have to take some liberties at the wide receiver position. We'll get there maybe where you get that where you trim the fat, I guess, at the wide receiver position. But those guys look like they're in great spots. The Carolina is 32nd DVOA against the rush, and they're actually kind of a reverse pass funnel. So there are a lot of reasons, and we don't need to justify CMC. But if you don't want to go with the two running backs from the same game, get ready with your red black-eyed Joe there, Devin. Laird against the Giants. at 4,500. It's not gonna feel right. But the guy, how many times he touched the ball last week? 19 times, and I'm getting him for $4,500 against a defense that I don't think is that good. He caught 4 passes in the 2 games that he started. Full PPR, there's no reason you can't take him as a salary relief if you want to go that route. In terms of cash and GPP viable.
Is that a cash game play?
That's a cash game play on DraftKings, not on FanDuel. Okay. A guy that I like in both formats, meaning cash and GPP. I will bring this back next week, by the way. If he.
But if he doesn't, you won't bring it up. Just to let everybody know.
But we will.
That's how John operates. If it hits, he makes sure to remind everyone. If it doesn't, he stays a little quiet.
I like to sprinkle these things in every once in a while.
Oh, there it is.
What about Todd Gurley this week? I mean, the guy, they went on record last week saying they were going to start they're going to pound him for the rest of the year, see what he had in him. And last week he had 27 touches for, I'm doing the math, 113 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. And he's only $6,000, which I don't know what he was last week, but I feel like that's less than he was last week. Happy to roll with him in both cash and GPPs if you want to go that route. I have 2 other GPPs on my list, but I'll hand it off to Ryan because I don't want to talk about everybody.
Yeah, what do you think, Ryan?
I don't have a ton of running backs written down, so we can come back to John. I focused on this. No, not right now. I have a couple. Not right now, though. Because again, I think we need to save time for wide receivers this week, given all the injury situations.
True.
Just play Darius Slayton.
So that's one of them. So back to Seattle and Carolina. I know not to beat the dead horse, but a couple of statistical things I saw there.
You're beating the dead horse.
Devin said don't be afraid of Seattle. They allow 48.8 receiving yards a game to running backs. So McCaffrey, game script proof, right? And so Carson's the same way. Carolina allows the most points via rushing touchdowns, highest ratio in the league at 40%. So the other one that I haven't heard mentioned here that is trending really hot lately is Raheem Mostert. So the guy is he's a top 5, he's RB16 in the last 5 weeks on a points per game basis. That's despite 3 of those 5 weeks he played under half the snaps. So in the last 2 weeks, he has played significant snaps, 78 snaps to Tevin Coleman's 20 to Matt Breida's 12. And today, Kyle Shanahan came out and said he has earned it in terms of the lead back role. So I would anticipate that snap share and the touch share to remain the same, if not tilt a little more his way. And he's been fantastic. He's 5,200 on DraftKings. Steve has him under 7%. I think it'll go up given the recent quote. But he's somebody that I think is being overlooked at that price point because we're looking down in the 4s for a Laird and we're looking up in the 7,500 and higher for Carson and McCaffrey.
Wouldn't you rather go James White at 54?
I have James White down too. My concern there is that the last 2 games they've played, James White has great stats, but they've been losing and they have lost. Are they going to be down to the Bengals?
It's fair.
You could, if you're playing James White, Tom Brady, Edelman, you're narrative streeting the whole thing of they're going to go up tempo, they're going to score a lot of points, they're either going to fix the offense.
I just think they're giving up on Sony Michel.
There could be a little bit of that too. If I'm them, I do that a little later, like when I'm pushing for the playoffs, but I'm not them. And I'd rather stick to things that we can read and know rather than feelings about how the Patriots coaches think. The other one that I noticed here that's GPP only again is if Will Fuller's out, and I know these guys don't catch passes in the same areas of the field, but Duke Johnson averages 2 more targets a game, 2 more catches a game, and 15 more receiving yards a game without Will Fuller. In the last 2 weeks, he has played more snaps than Carlos Hyde. So I think that there might be a changing of the guard in that backfield. Plus, you get the potential of a shootout in that game, which could bring him to the surface more too.
I like that smile that John got on his face. He's like, it wasn't me first this time. John, who else was on your list?
I fixed it right away, though.
You did. You did.
I typically don't even know what I said.
Well, I have James White. I have James White written above Duke Johnson, so I went Carlos White. Yeah.
That's typically what happens to me too, Ryan. I get it.
Sure.
That's what it is. Yep.
Yeah. So
who you got, John? You had a couple more guys on your list.
Yeah, I had a couple more guys on my list. The Jacksonville Jaguars have been getting blasted on the grounds over the past 5 weeks. Normalized strength of schedule, third worst in the NFL, but you don't even need normalized strength of schedule. Just look at what they've done in terms of allowing yardage on the ground over the past, again, something like a month. Fourth most points to running backs over the course of the year. Last week, they allowed Austin Eckler to go for 100 on the ground and through the air. Prior to that, they gave up a pair of touchdowns to Peyton Barber. Prior to that, a pair of touchdowns, 160 to Derrick Henry, 100 yards to Mack the week before. Jonathan Williams in the same week went for 100. They're a mess. Whoever's starting for the Oakland Raiders, I like. We just don't know that as of Thursday night. It looks like maybe Jacobs is going to be back, but be watching, watch what happens in this Oakland backfield on Friday at practice. And then what I always do, and I would highly recommend it to our viewers and subscribers, Gene Bramwell is the best in the business with regards to injuries and reading them in terms of playing time and output. On Sunday morning, I'll be looking for his Sunday morning updates, which are posted typically between 9 and 10 a.m. on what he thinks is going to happen there in that Oakland backfield. And I'll definitely be going one way or the other there. And then the last one, I won't go into a whole lot of detail other than to say that the Kansas City Chiefs are allowing more production to this position than any team in the league, including some of the bad defenses we've already referred to. And Philip Lindsay has been getting extra work out of that Denver backfield. And quite frankly, that defense or that offense didn't look too bad last week with Luck under center. He threw for over 300 yards against Houston. Maybe that's not a huge feat. But over the past few weeks, Philip Lindsay, 18 touches, 20 touches, 14, 18 since the break. I think that he's playable against Kansas City, who hasn't been able to stop running backs for most of the season.
Devin, you said you liked this Dolphins-Giants game. You mentioned the quarterbacks. Are we overlooking Saquon Barkley against the Dolphins in a smash spot?
No.
You don't think it's happening?
He came out and finally admitted he's not healthy this week. Hey,
okay.
It's not happening this year.
Okay. Just making sure.
At least for me,
yeah.
Could he break an 80-yard run? Sure, he's Saquon Barkley, but that's kind of who he is. But I'm not relying on it.
Yeah. All right. It's Eli Manning week. Any other running backs, fellas? All right. Good. Let's talk about wide receivers. There's a ton to talk about with wide receivers. Please subscribe to our channel, hit the bell so you get alerts, and give us a thumbs up on this video. There's a ton of injuries here. As soon as a wide receiver gets injured this late in the season on a team that's out of contention, they're sort of done for the year. Mike Evans is out for the year. Calvin Ridley's out for the year. Marvin Jones out for the year. DJ Shark is out. I can't remember if that's out for the year. Alshon Jeffrey looks like
game.
Alshon Jeffrey's out.
Game.
Yeah.
These are all the guys I mentioned.
Auden Tate is out.
That's John's guy.
And
that is my guy.
It looks like Adam Thielen may return after missing 4 games. We might get.
They've been saying that for weeks.
I know, but he's been practicing a little bit more this week.
And then he plays one snap, and you can't trust Adam Thielen.
Sure. Okay, fine. Maybe you're right. Will Fuller's probably in that same camp, even though he's only missed 1 game. And then Richard Sherman's going to be out for this Atlanta-San Francisco game, which maybe makes Julio kind of interesting. All right, guys, that's a lot of things to think about. Let's go to Ryan first on receivers. Ryan, tell me, any of these injury situations interest you, or are there other guys you have your eye on?
No, I mean, sure, they of course do, especially when we're spending $17,500 at running back.
Right.
So the key is going to be figuring out this mid to high 4,000s pricing tier, and that's DraftKings specific. So let's just go names, and then we can all maybe pick our favorite, I suppose.
Sure.
But we have D.D. Westbrook for Jacksonville. We're assuming DJ Shark is out. There was a slightly positive report today, but I don't think the guy plays. It's a high ankle sprain, so he's not playing.
D.D. Westbrook's also questionable.
So there's that. There's Darius. I didn't know that, so thank you. There's Darius Slayton for the Giants, which Devin already alluded to. So Devin likes him there, and then Devin's going to not like this, but also mid-4s GPP leverage off those guys. There's Brashad Perriman in Tampa. he's proven to be a not accomplished player. Let's just say that. He did attend a certain university.
There it is.
But he had 83% of the snaps last week. He actually had 60% or more in 6 of his 10 healthy games. There was one game where he popped a hammy in the first quarter. And he's been over 50%.
Can I stop you right there?
But he's on the field.
But he's been on the field.
Are they going to put 2 more guys besides him on the field?
My problem is he's a receiver who's been on the field and hasn't had a role. So
we might not have Jameis Winston either.
Well, but okay, so this is contingent on Jameis Winston playing, first of all.
Fair.
Second of all, are we sure Jameis Winston's capable of throwing to 4 different people? Like
just Chris Godwin.
If you look at Tampa, they throw more passes to wide receivers than anybody in the league. They throw more of their yards to wide receivers than anybody in the league.
But it has to do with the primary routes, and is he going to change? Are they going to change the plays where he's now a primary receiver? I don't know if he's going to change positions in that offense.
Rashad Perriman can run in a straight line.
That we've seen. We have seen that. All right, let's not spend more time on Perriman.
So that's my Perriman. He's on the field, and Detroit allows deep balls. It's a GPP play. That's my Perriman thing. But I want to hear the mid-4s, what you guys think, because I really do think that's part of it. You need 1 or 2 of those guys to make a lineup in cash that you feel good about.
John, who are your guys in that range?
Well, I think D.D. Westbrook has to be in the conversation, assuming he is healthy. And obviously, we record a bit earlier in the week, so monitor that moving forward. But when I look at the wide receiver cornerback matchup for Westbrook, he kind of pops off the list at me. He's got a 4-inch advantage over Lamarcus Joyner out of the slot. Lamarcus Joyner, Devin, myself, and he could line up in a 40-yard dash, and we would probably only lose by about that much. So I'm happy to take the speed advantage and the height. Well, maybe not you, Devin, but I'm pretty quick. I'm like a jungle cat. I think, I'll take the height advantage. I'll take the speed advantage with D.D. Westbrook at 4,600, especially on a week where we're pretty sure that DJ Chark's not going to play. That's in that mid-4 range. I think that's where I want to go. Certainly Darius Slayton is in play after what we saw last week with the connections that he's making with Eli Manning. He's 4,700. I'll steal one from Devin. I think for cash games, Sutton against Kansas City is certainly in play at 5,900. He continues to be heavily used in that offense. And then lastly, for cash games, Keenan Allen against Minnesota at 6,300 is a player that kind of pops off the page at me as well. He'll get Mackenzie Alexander in coverage out of the slot. He has I like the height advantage, especially when you're getting inside the red zone. These guys, they just put it up, and with Keenan Allen, he's got 4 inches on him, and I think that he's certainly in play at only 6,300.
Devin, do you agree, or do you have other guys?
Yeah, Westbrook's interesting. I think that if you wanted to go cheaper, you could go Chris Conley at 3,600, especially if Westbrook is limited. Oakland's secondary has been atrocious over the last several weeks. They traded Gary and Conley, which was kind of surprising, and they really haven't. I mean, Conley wasn't good for them anyway, but he was probably one of their best corners. Conley should see a significant number of snaps. At 36, if you really wanted to save salary, I think he's a solid play. Going up, I like DeAndre Hopkins quite a bit. $8,000, it's expensive, but we've talked about basically every other high-end receiver is questionable this week. So it's a bit of a challenge. And then Kenny Galladay, I think, is in a great spot against Tampa Bay as well. We've talked about Tampa Bay all year, and they've struggled against pass catching receivers. So David Blau has connected on Galladay on that Thanksgiving slate, and has shown he's not afraid to throw the deep ball. But and then one last guy I'll throw out there. What do I want to do? I'm going to do it. I think that Larry Fitzgerald at home has a decent game against the Browns.
Ryan hates this pick. For those of you listening to the audio version, he couldn't even find his red black eyed Joe. He was so distraught by this.
Here you go, Ryan. You can borrow mine.
At 4,300, I think that Christian Kirk is going to have a difficult time going up against Denzel Ward. And Grady Williams is on the other side. So the slot is kind of how you can potentially beat the Browns. And is this his last home game? I think it's his last home game in Arizona. He may retire after this year. So there's a bit of a narrative there too that
I buy the narrative more than anything else.
But who are they going to throw to? I mean, Kirk is going to be tied up with one of, if not the fastest corners in the league.
If you like Larry Fitzgerald and not Kirk, it explains everything about you not liking Kyler Murray.
Well, I mean, Denzel Ward.
Didn't we say 6 weeks ago that your time to play Larry Fitzgerald has passed? I mean, it's not September anymore.
I'm just saying in cash at 4,300.
But man, that's hard to do.
5 for 50, maybe score a touchdown at home.
Yeah, the narrative. I like the narrative more than anything else you said, actually.
Once I told you the narrative, it's like, all right,
I know.
Don't buy the narratives. Never buy the naratives.
And I confirmed it is his last game in Arizona. So it's a bit of a – I think if they're in the red zone, they're going to throw it to him at least once.
Yeah, I agree. Week 15 is usually young guy season, not old guy season, but retired guy season could be a thing.
3-9-1 team wants to get their Hall of Fame receiver in the end zone one last time.
In front of the home fans. All right.
In front of the 14,000 fans that will be in Arizona.
Right, exactly.
Devin, because last week it was a Steeler crowd, not an Arizona crowd. So, Devin, do you have thoughts on Jarvis Landry because he's very popular this week?
Yeah,
for a good reason.
Do I have thoughts on him? Yeah, I haven't thought he would do this well all year, and he has. So I think the Browns will be able to run the ball for most of the game. What's his price? I
67 DraftKings.
That's really expensive.
100 more than DJ Moore.
It's really expensive.
It's a matchup tweak for sure.
And 400 more than Keenan Allen.
Yeah.
I think if I'm going up to 67, I'm finding a way to go a couple hundred higher, whether that's I think that it'll be Galladay or I'm going all the way up, and I'll play Chris Conley over Westbrook to save salary.
That makes sense. Yeah,
all right.
Makes sense.
That's a good question. No one mentioned Julian Edelman. He's showing up pretty high on our lineup optimizer. John, you got any thoughts on Edelman?
I'll take him. He's had over the past 5 weeks, 11 targets, 10 targets, 12 targets, 12 targets, and 12 targets. I like targets, and I'm happy to pay for them. I guess the question with him is whether or not he's got the upside. Despite what I've just described, he's only surpassed 100 yards in one time out of those 5 games. He has scored in back-to-back games, so take it for what it's worth. And then I think maybe Devin referenced earlier that this game might not be close. Maybe that was Ryan.
Ryan pointed that out about James White, I think.
So. I just worry they try to get some of these other receivers that haven't done anything involved. They can go ahead.
Yeah, it would make sense to do that, right? I think that the offense is not clicking. I think we're all aware of that. They haven't. Looking back over their game logs since the bye week, the highest team total was 22 points. So they've won with 17-13, and then they lost 2 in a row. Scoring 16 and 22. So from that end, you might speculate that they're going to try some things, and what better week to do it than against the Bengals in an out of division contest when they finish with the Bills and the Dolphins. So maybe that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, can we really envision some of these new guys coming in and taking double-digit targets away from Edelman? I don't know. I think he's still in play, to answer your original question, Austin.
Yeah, but it sounds like people, as far as cash goes, maybe would prefer paying up for Hopkins if you're going to go on the high end, or looking at some of these other low to mid-range guys to save salary and play expensive running backs. It sounds like that's where the lineup builds are going.
For cash, I'm either going with like 2 mid receivers like a DJ Moore or Keenan Allen, or I'm going all the way up to Hopkins.
Right.
Or maybe Godwin, but it's probably Hopkins. And then 2 or 3 cheap receivers.
Yeah. When they were talking about like Jameis Winston, like, oh yeah, he's working with a tennis ball on Thursday. Like that makes me a little bit nervous that he's having trouble gripping beyond a tennis ball. So I'm not getting excited about Godwin until I hear that Winston is like A-okay. Let's talk about some tight ends. Please use the YouTube comments to tell us which of these picks you like, which ones you don't, or ask us questions as some of these injury situations evolve later in the week. The one tight end I have my eye on here is Noah Fant. He got limited practice Thursday, but it looks like he's going to go. So that's the only one I'm keeping an eye on. John, who do you like at tight end?
Before I tell you who I like at tight end, I want to ask a question to the guys, to yourself included. Tyler Higbee, 2 weeks in a row, 7 catches, 100-plus yards. Is this a thing? Is this real? Is this going to be sustainable? Is this what's responsible for what I talked about earlier with Jared Goff's resurgence? Do we believe it? They're going up against Dallas this week. He jumps off as the highest-rated player on our IBCs. I'm not sure I buy it, but I'm going to defer to you guys because I'm not quite sure, and I don't have a strong opinion. So what do you guys think before I say who I like?
I think they've simplified the offense to a point where they're not even looking for Brandon Cooks deep down the field. They're just moving the ball short underneath routes to Woods and Higbee. I think it's a real thing.
Yeah, I do too. And if Gerald Everett is out again, I especially like it as a real thing. He's played 140 of the last 149 snaps. He's an every down player for under 4,000, seeing 25% of the team targets. 2 games is a small sample, but he's only played 2 games without Gerald Everett. Dallas allows 5.4 receptions a game to tight ends, which is 6th most in the league. So I don't see why they'd stop. And the only reason to stop is if Everett plays and absorbs some of those snaps. But I don't know.
Well, he didn't practice today, so yeah. I think you guys are basically telling the folks watching that Higbee is in play.
Yep.
Read my article to get my final stance. I'm on the fence right now. Where does Buzzard have him? Again, I always go back
8.3.
8.3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I that's not terrible. I could live with that if that's where it's going to be. The guys I like are a bit more expensive.
Just real quick, he's far too expensive on DraftKings at $5,700. The benefit of him under 4K and on DraftKings is what makes him intriguing.
You mean at FanDuel is $5,700?
That's what I mean. Yeah,
yes.
FanDuel.
Yes, agreed. He's 39 at DraftKings, and that's still fine.
Yeah, 39's fine. Yep. 57's too much.
Got it. Agreed.
For me, the guys I'm looking at continue to do this. Darren Waller at 5,500 against Jacksonville. He's really attractive to me, simply because there's nobody else to throw to. I mean, now that Hunter Renfrow is done, Tyrell Williams, kind of this deep threat who doesn't really match up with Derek Carr's skill set. The person you throw to there is Darren Waller, and he's 5,500. He's getting wide receiver one-like action at $5,500. So if you've got the salary, go with him. And then, in the same price range, these are both cash game plays, by the way. I will be spending up at tight end, which is typically something that I don't do. But Zach Ertz against Washington is another guy. We saw last week when Alshon Jeffrey went out, how much they used him. He ended up basically single-handedly winning the game for them. And he's only $6,000 against Washington. Who else are they going to throw to? This is a must-win situation for them, and I'm really disappointed that I saw a red black-eyed Joe from Ryan because well, go ahead, Ryan. Tell me why Zach Ertz is a bad play this week.
It's a half of a red black-eyed Joe, and only because
I saw a full one, by the way.
All right, so let's do. Should I do that?
That's a half one right there.
Oh, so half. So go that way.
Look, it makes a full one between your two screens. That's cute.
All right. So, on your screen. Well, yeah. I mean, so Zach Ertz plays every down anyways. Dallas Goedert plays a little more with Alshon Jeffrey out. We've seen he's $1,700 cheaper. So again, I just don't know how you're getting to $6,000 at tight end. There's some sacrifices elsewhere that I don't know that I'm willing to make, and that's all. I agree that Ertz will see more targets. I agree he's very good. I agree without Jeffrey, he's probably the number 1, but I'm okay taking the number 2/3 for $1,700 less at a non-premium position. That was the only nitpick. Hence the half red. It was a nitpick.
All right.
Not a full-on disagreement, just a nitpick.
Okay. You're forgiven.
I like him. I just can't get there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Same thing. Agreed.
The builds aren't working out. Devin, who are you playing at tight end? And sorry, it's Noah Fant, not Font. I mispronounced it. Devin, what do you got?
Waller's the guy on FanDuel at 6,200. He's almost a must play. 50. Yeah, he might be a little too high on DraftKings for me just because I'm looking to save money at the position. If Ryan Griffin plays over Jameis Winston, OJ Howard is extremely interesting this week as a GPP play. So we've seen these inexperienced quarterbacks time and time again come into the game and look for their tight end. Are they really going to take – is a rookie – he's not a rookie, but is a inexperienced quarterback really going to come in and take deep shots to Rashad Perriman? Unless his name's David Blau, I sort of doubt it. And Howard is – I mean, he had 4 for 40-something last week. So he was involved. He was involved after Mike Evans did depart. The other guy I like as a very deep target is David Njoku at 3,500 against Arizona. We've talked about it most of the year. Njoku didn't really make that big of an impact last week. He's sort of the guy who looks like Tarzan plays like Jane, in that he really hasn't been that great throughout his entire career.
Wow.
But he's
also OJ Howard a little bit?
Very similar, but they're both cheap GPP flyers.
Yeah. But Njoku only played 38% of the snaps last week in his first game back. We would expect him to get double that this week.
Agreed.
Right?
I like both calls.
Yep. And he's a red zone target that they desperately need because I think they have the worst red zone stats in the league, and Odell Beckham can't get open inside the 10-yard line apparently. So
they will keep throwing it to him.
Yeah. So those are the 3 or 4 guys I do like this week. Kelsey's always in play as a GPP play. I'm not ever going to tell you no, but I'm looking to save a little bit this week.
And I think that's one of the ways where you can differentiate yourself in GPPs, right? If all the builds are saying pay down at tight end, then you can sort of flip it and play the high-priced guy, Kelsey, in a GPP to mix things up. So look to maybe change up your build from your cash games to your GPPs, and then you end up with way different guys. Ryan, you got one more?
Yeah, if Greg Olsen doesn't play, what about Ian Thomas again? He played 61 of 71 snaps last week.
Yep.
He
pretty
ran
good.
45 routes. He was out wide. He was everywhere. They were trailing in the game, but there's a good chance they're trailing again. They kind of stink. So I like Ian Thomas too.
He's not nearly as cheap as he was last week, but
he's still 3,100 on DraftKings. So
up to 53 on FanDuel, which is a lot.
Okay.
We didn't mention either tight end in the Atlanta and San Francisco game. I'm imagining those are both GPP plays, or is there something that I'm overlooking that you'd be like, I'm not really on either of those guys for GPPs?
They're fine.
They're both good GPP plays. I mean,
I don't like Cooper that much.
Yeah, but you like Kittle maybe.
Why don't I like Cooper?
Just a matchup-based dislike?
It's a matchup thing. So San Francisco's allowed the 4th fewest points to opposing tight ends, and a big reason for that is with that defensive line, you have to keep your tight end in the block a little bit more.
Interesting, though. Last 5 weeks, they're 24th in the league against tight ends when prior they were 3rd. So
in fairness, they've had some injuries to that defensive front over the past few weeks.
Yeah.
So
maybe teams are sending guys out more. So maybe
it's been touchdown dependent. They've allowed 3 touchdowns last week. So
I'd rather not throw it at Sherman though. I'd rather throw it to a tight end.
But Hooper's so expensive. My problem is his price.
But that's what I was just looking at. One of the things I do just globally is to look at ownership percentages, independent of price and everything else, and I gauge talent versus ownership. Yeah. And as I scroll up the list right now, things that pop off at me, I think that Dallas Goedert, to Ryan's credit, is 3%. That's probably too low given what we talked about with Zach Ertz. And just above him is Austin Hooper at 3.4%. And then I go up the list and I see most of the other players that we've been talking about, they make more sense. Ian Thomas at 8%. Tyler Higbee, for the reasons we led off the segment with, he's at 11, and then you've got the normal guys, right? Kelsey, Waller, Ertz, and Kittle, all of whom are in double digits. So when we're looking to be contrarian, I look for talents and try to avoid matchup, especially where GPPs are considered, and Hooper and Goedert kind of stand out to me.
I'd rather go Hunter Henry at 52.
Well, you're talking about matchup. I don't think the Vikings have allowed a touchdown to the tight end position all season, have they?
They've allowed one.
Okay.
They've allowed more yards, and I look at more yards for, I think, touchdowns sort of normalized.
Yeah, that means they're due, John. Due to give up another touchdown.
Regression and stuff.
Let's talk about defenses, everybody's favorite position, especially John's.
Play Arizona.
Arizona, Devin, you like Arizona?
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield throws interceptions to everybody. He
All
threw
right.
2 to Cincinnati. I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns lose this game at $2,200. Arizona is the way to save salary this week.
That would be awesome.
Nice. Yeah, it's a good place to save salary. Ryan, is that who's on your list?
Yeah, I mean, for cash, they were one of. Similarly, another quarterback that throws a lot of interceptions, especially if his thumb doesn't feel good, is Jameis Winston. Detroit hosts him for $100 more. Or they play Ryan Griffin. So, not awful for a bargain basement price. One GPP play, and it's strictly just because I don't think anyone's going to do it, is Oakland is hosting a Jacksonville team that has given up and has to travel cross country. So my first reaction to Oakland was 3,200, no thanks. So I think for GPP reasons, maybe that's a good play.
John, what do you?
One more thing real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
Seattle is just my GPP team. So have you guys seen Kyle Allen's sack numbers over the last 4 weeks?
Yeah, but Seattle can't get there.
21 sacks over the last 4 weeks. To Atlanta, Washington, Atlanta.
It's true.
New Orleans has a decent pass rush, but Washington and Atlanta are not.
They do not.
Shout out to Adam Harstad. Sacks are a quarterback stat, right? So,
yeah, 50 sacks for the Panthers this year. So, it's a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Good call, John. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't hate that. I don't hate that call. The one I was looking for a stat when you asked me. I was looking for Carolina over the past 3 weeks is tied with Atlanta for the most sacks allowed with 16. So take that for what it's worth. Then Arizona is a bit beyond that, so maybe the Browns are in play. I don't know.
No.
Devin says no.
Yeah,
Myles Garrett and Olivier Vernon are out. They have no pass rush.
The stat that I was actually looking for, I'm just kind of reading as I'm going through, but the stat I was looking for is David Blau and his tendency to hang on to the ball, waiting for players to get open. They're fifth most sacks allowed, the Detroit Lions. And, going against Tampa Bay, nobody's going to go against Tampa Bay or roster Tampa Bay because of how bad their secondary has been all season. There's certainly a contrarian GPP play. If you're playing 10 to 20 lineups, I'd have them in 1 to 2 for that reason. But nobody mentioned the Eagles. That's my chalk stack my chalk defense of the week against Dwayne Haskins. He's got, I think, 3 touchdowns versus 7 interceptions on the year. The Eagles are, I don't know what's going on with the Eagles right now, but this is a must-win situation for them. And Dwayne Haskins, again, I don't think he's NFL ready. No offense to the Ohio State alumni on staff here, but I just think this is a great spot for the Eagles to potentially get a pick 6 and catapult to the top. So I'm going chalky at defense this week.
Packers are also interesting against Mitch Trubisky. We talked about how we do like him, but
I agree.
He's played the Cowboys, Lions, and Giants the last 3 weeks, so he hasn't played world beaters. So there's a chance he turns back into a pumpkin in the old Mitch Trubisky.
I feel like the NFC East right now, it's not must win, it's must not lose.
It's must tie.
Must tie, must do something. Let's talk about stacks, fellas. I think that we've kind of teased a few and mentioned some pairings that'll work out here. Devin, tell me about some stacks you like.
Well, Eli Manning and Darius Slayton.
I knew that was coming. I knew it was.
Of course.
And run it back with Devontae Parker. Let's go.
If he's playing.
If he doesn't, Allen Hurns is in a great spot. So I love this game. I know I said I loved the Jets and I loved the Dolphins last week, and they kicked 7 field goals, which is an extreme bummer.
Hey, that just means they moved the ball, buddy. They moved the ball.
I know it's a
they're
bummer.
due.
It's the right spot, but they just couldn't finish. So I do like that game a lot. I think the other thing that I'll say is Jimmy Garoppolo is interesting, and I don't really know who to pair him with. It's probably Deebo Samuel, but Atlanta's secondary has been really bad this year, so I could see that game shooting out and not really the way that we think. It's maybe the San Francisco defense was exposed last week, so I could see a game stack of Garoppolo, Julio Jones, and Deebo Samuel.
And I put Garoppolo on my evaluator tool that Maurel Tremblay and I work on because the price differential is huge between DraftKings and FanDuel. You want to play him on DraftKings. He's higher priced on FanDuel.
Yeah.
John, stacks.
Stacks. I think if you're playing 3-mans or 5X, you these games where you can't play a cash game lineup, but you want to do something that's what our buddy David Dodds calls cash plus, I believe. Don't be afraid to do like an Eli Darius stack. It's cheap. It gives you upside, but it's still safe. It's not going to kill you. So that's a
do it in cash.
Say again.
Get some balls and do it in cash.
Yeah. Oh no, I think you can do it. I think you can do it in cash too. But I suspect that's where it fits best for what it's worth.
Yeah. So John on brand didn't hear that Devin mentioned that stack off the top. What's your next one?
Oh, well, I'm making my own stacks here.
Yeah.
The stack that I like most that I looked at, you guys were talking about Jimmy G. I did hear that, and he named out the wrong receiver. It's not Debo, it's Manny Sanders. That's who you go with this week. Manny Sanders lining up on the right side. Guess who he goes against? I've been waiting years to say this. Guess who he goes against this week in terms of matchup?
Is it Bleedy Ray?
No.
Is it really?
It is.
No. I didn't know he was still in the league.
He is still in the league, and he gives up a lot of speed and skill to Manny Sanders, who looked like he was right last week. And so I'm going to have a lot of Emmanuel Sanders this week.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a throwback to like Roto Grinders show like 2 years ago, man.
That was before I was on this show.
Yeah.
It is. And, the Niners have the highest implied team total on the entire slate going back to where we started this show. Love Manny Sanders this week. I think he's a really nice GPP play. And I'll throw one out to Devin. I was listening earlier, and I reluctantly agree with you on the Larry Fitzgerald. Excuse me, I almost blew it there. Larry Fitzgerald and Kyler Murray. I think that stack is worthwhile this week for a number of reasons, but I think you covered it already. Last one, Drew Luck to Sutton. I think that Sutton is certainly in play.
Drew Lock.
What did I say?
Drew Lock. Andrew
That was pretty
Luck.
close.
He's not Andrew Luck's brother.
You were closer to Andrew Luck than you were Drew Lock.
English isn't my native tongue, guys.
I don't even know what to say.
At least we waited until the second time to correct you.
What is it, Cajun?
Did I say it wrong both times?
Yeah.
You dropped a Luck during quarterbacks too, or whenever.
Yeah.
All right.
I was just imagining like Andrew Luck, but like with like a funny mustache and like no beard, like he was his evil twin, and he snuck back in the league as a quarterback on another team.
He looks closer to Andrew Luck than I thought Drew Lock would look in his defense. He's been pretty good.
Oh yeah, there you go. Ryan, who are you stacking?
I'm ready now.
Nice.
So we talked about the Rams and Dallas being high scoring. We didn't talk about anybody on those teams. So Dak Prescott and either of his receivers and running it back with Robert Woods. Does anyone know why Cooper Kupp only played 20 snaps last week? That was sort of weird. But it's hard to go back to him, especially because I think he's still priced higher than Woods. Woods has been used pretty well the last couple of weeks, but I like any part of that game since it has a high total, and we didn't talk about it very much. I think everybody's going to be drawn to the cheap guys in these, sort of, 1 o'clock local air only CBS kind of games, like Jacksonville, Oakland we've been talking about, and Giants, Dolphins we've been talking about. These are real teams playing football here that still have playoff aspirations with good players. So
College games are more high scoring than NFL games, and when you put college talent on the field, it's shootout.
Okay. Well, sure. So we'll keep running up, the
Dolphins, Giants.
Let's go, baby.
I know. It's hard for me to really argue with you because I like that game too. But if you don't and you want to, teams in contention, we didn't talk enough about that game particularly because it's very stackable. A lot of guys in it. The target distributions are pretty well known, and all we talked about really was Tyler Higbee. So
yeah, that game is interesting. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but it really is interesting because I think the thought is that the Rams have a good defense. And Dallas limits big plays because of their zone defense, and yet we know they both have excellent offenses. It'll be interesting to see what ownership looks like heading into the weekend, and I agree completely. There's a lot of game stacks.
And at this time of year, people freak out too much about weather, but it's in Dallas, so we know that's not going to be a concern. So that one interests me just because we didn't talk about it enough, I think. So any way to stack up that game would be a stack of mine.
Nice. Devin, let's move on to parting thoughts. I want to hear what your week 15 words of wisdom are, or maybe an article that people should check out over at footballguys.com.
Because the comment section loves to talk about weather, I will say there's no weather concerns this week.
Right on. He's saying that on Thursday night. Now there's going to be like a blizzard in Cleveland.
It's going to be cold in Green Bay, but it's always cold in Green Bay, so don't worry about it.
There can be a blizzard in Cleveland. Won't matter.
Oh, yeah, right, because they're not playing in Cleveland. Good point. Good point. John, parting thoughts?
Not a whole lot this week. I think, I'll say maybe somebody I didn't mention, the Atlanta Falcons passing game against San Francisco. San Francisco, last week we saw them go back and forth against New Orleans. Atlanta's 10.5-point underdog in this game. So they're going to be throwing the ball quite a bit. Matt Ryan coming off of back-to-back 300-yard games, and then 270 before that, 311 before that. So 3 of the previous 4 games he's thrown for 300 yards. Don't be afraid to stack them up, and we know there's some injury situations there to be aware of. So I don't hate Matt Ryan this week in GPPs. This is the guy I didn't mention earlier.
Nice. Ryan, bring it home. Last parting thought.
Yeah, so unfortunately this is my final show of the year because next week I can't make it. I have a holiday commitment. So wanted to thanks, John.
I was the wrong one.
Man, I was just about to thank you guys for your professionalism and the rapport that we've built together. I appreciate you guys putting up with my sarcasm and interrupting all of you all the time, but these things have to get said sometimes. But more importantly, thanks to our ever-growing base of fans, both listeners and viewers and commenters, especially those that make fun of Devin. And happy holiday season to everybody, you guys and the fans alike. So thanks a bunch. I'll miss y'all next week and can't wait to
tune in to next week's show, which is better than this week's show.
And I'm sure last week's show was better than this one too.
You're right.
Ryan, we love you. We're going to miss you on our season finale show next week.
Consider me the veteran with the minor injury. I'm just going to sit out for the rest of the year. I'll see you, later.
Right. Ryan's being sent to IR.
Overpaid.
Yes.
We can argue that.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. We appreciate your hard work on the show and joining us and putting up with our, harassment week in and week out. Be sure to check out all of our content over at footballguys.com. We'll be back next Friday morning with our season finale Week 16 show. We'll have Phil Alexander filling in for Ryan again. And I'm Austin Lee. On behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, and Ryan Hester, thank you for watching, and thanks for being a football guy. To check out our content at footballguys.com, click the button on Devin's face. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click on the giant video in front of Ryan's face. Click any of those now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.